Jimmy, what are your plans for 2015 and beyond?
Okay, right. Well, it's an interesting question because what I've been involved with is I had a sort of plan. Okay.
Wow. You know, wow, that was really something, Jimmy.
I think it really is,
tell you,
yeah.
be in the presence of Jimmy. But, you know, I'm so thrilled to be on the stage here with Jimmy. And I heard that Jimmy Page was going to be here at the 92nd Street Y. And one of my staff members told me, and I said, they said he's going to be in conversation. I said, with who? And they said it didn't say anybody. So I got on the phone immediately, and I called, and I said, please, let me interview Jimmy. Let me talk with Jimmy. And so I'm just so thrilled because within my life and learning how, and I'm sure that we all can share this type story, but I learned how to feel through listening to Jimmy's music. I was 14 the first time that I heard Jimmy's music. I heard Led Zeppelin 1, and my life was changed. All of a sudden, I felt a sense of hope and of expansion. And so you've just been so generous, Jimmy, and you know, it's just so great to be here and to talk with you and to learn about you know, your life. And this book is fantastic. It's a photo autobiography, and we'll look at some of the images.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks so much.
I mean, yeah. So, now, when I look at that, all of a sudden, within my own mind, I hear, your time is going to come.
Yeah. Well, I thought this was a really good place to start. Some of the photographs in the book come from like my own archive or the family archive as such. And this was taken by the organist and choirmaster of this church choir that I went to, and he was an amateur photographer, and consequently there was this photograph taken and a few others, but this was given to my family. So the fact of it is, this whole book was relative to my life in music, but actually I was playing the guitar at this point, and that was during the process of clearing copyrights on all of the images in the book. If I didn't have them myself, I got hold of the estate of the name of the organist and choirmaster was Mr. Coffin, which was pretty appropriate really for somebody from the church choir. Yeah. So anyway, I got hold of his relatives, and he was, when I say I did, it was somebody on my behalf. And then a story was related whereby Mr. Coffin had told his son-in-law, was now in charge of the estate, that he remembered me going to choir practices early with a guitar to try and tune it with the organ. So, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, I suppose.
So, but was church the first experience of music, of being in the chorus, or?
Well, it sort of was. It was really. By this point, I'd been seduced by music coming out of the speakers, you know, the radio, and really it was American music that was sort of translated, either the real product coming through, the rock and roll, rockabilly, Little Richard, that sort of thing, or it was like the local heroes like Cliff Richard, or there was this guy called Lonnie Donegan who started like the whole skiffle movement, and skiffle meant that if you had a guitar, then you could actually possibly be able to play it and do these sort of songs. And a lot of the guitarists from the 60s, they all started off the same way, really.
So now, skiffle.
Yeah.
So you were on television as a young man, around 13 or 14?
Yeah.
Was it a...
Yeah.
Were you doing skiffle?
It was yes, it was skiffle. It was very embarrassing. You know, it's one of those, I've got to tell you, you know, when you've had a whole sort of lifetime in music, there are certain things that come up and haunt you. And that is one of them. Because I can see this precocious kid, you know, really trying hard, as nervous as anything in front of the cameras, beaming whatever is being done into everybody's homes, you know. And I was quite a shy kid. I was still quite a shy person, really. I'm sort of quite introvert. So under that sort of scrutiny, all manner of things were said, and mistakes were probably played as I carried on through it. But it's got a charm about it.
You know, in the book, and the book is fantastic because it covers, you know, Jimmy's life, and there are many images. I'm going to go to another one, but we go from this really such a rapid development, because when you're, you know, working in sessions and a session musician, you're still just maybe about 15 years old at this time?
Now, I'm a little older than that. What happens is, when the choirboy picture, obviously I'm at school, and that clip, the skiffle clip, I'm at school, and I had I actually sort of joined a band straight after school. I'd done a deal with my dad that I would keep my academic work up, because he didn't really quite know what was going on with all this guitar business, but nor did I, really. I mean, I'd been infected by something, and it was no getting rid of. There was no cure for it. I mean, that was it. But I'd promised to do all this, you know, to do my academic work, and I had. And in effect, I was in a group, and we were doing sort of blues music, and the chess catalogue we were playing a lot of. During that point of time, as a kid, as a teenager, I'd already accessed sort of Indian music, Arabic music, rockabilly, country blues, which is the acoustic guitar playing, and the electric movement that had come out of Chicago, like chess records and all of that. When I got this opportunity to be a session musician, I also played harmonica. I was a young kid. I was sort of 7 years junior to anybody else that was in the session scene at that point of time. But the fact that I had all these different styles of guitar that I felt passionate about, and I tried to learn, not too well, but at least I could, you know, approach them all. It put me in good stead for this whole job as a studio musician, because you weren't a specialist as such. You went in there and you go right across the whole field of guitar playing, and you know, it suited me quite well, because I was self-taught, but I obviously was doing the right thing.
So, Jimmy, I read that when people would hire you, a lot of times, at the time you didn't read music, that they would just let you perform whatever you wanted to perform. It was just kind of like get out of the way and let Jimmy just kind of do his thing.
Well, see, that's true. That's true. In the early days of sort of being introduced into it, I could read chord charts, so I knew when to stop and when to start, and I could do that. But they'd say, well, you know, you know, just add something if you want. And because I was at the age that I was at, I was the same age as all the sort of young groups that were out there. And I had the same points of reference, like R&B music and blues music and rock, all this sort of stuff. But I also could play fingerstyle acoustic playing, so I could fit into many areas. But in the early days, it was, and I had the chords, and they'd say, well, just, make up things if you want, just piece in things. Don't just play the basic chords. And I got a reputation, I guess, for doing that and being reliable. I guess the other thing was that it was a very closed shop, this world of the studio musicians. And looking back in retrospect, I must have done pretty well, because if you'd have messed up, because time was money, every second was money, and if I hadn't have been able to sort of deliver it, and I didn't think of it in a pressurized way at all, but actually it would have been a lot of pressure if I'd have thought that way, because one mess up and you wouldn't be seen again. So I did pretty good.
Jimmy was really like the #1, #2 session musician, in England, in London.
Yeah.
And so, many records that we are very familiar with, Jimmy played on. You played on some of Hermit's songs, on Donovan, the Stones.
Yeah, Donovan. I did a few things. Sunshine Superman is one that everyone knows. I worked quite a bit on the Donovan albums with him too. Yeah.
And what are some other ones that you're really proud of?
Well, okay. It goes right across.
Yeah.
I was on, say, The Who's Can't Explain. Well, actually, you should really applaud them, because to be involved in something like that, I was brought in, and you can hear what I do right in the background, because Pete is playing the lead and everything, but to actually be on that session, and it was in a small recording studio, and everything is like a performance in these days, like performance art. And just being there in the energy of it, and I'm just doing the riff underneath, on those circumstances. But I was on some really, really dramatic sessions. Like I played on Goldfinger, but Shirley Bassey came into it was rehearsed by John Barry, and Shirley Bassey comes into the studio, and she goes to the mic. She just does one take. And then she collapses. She's so dramatic. She just collapses on the floor. And I'm just a kid going, oh my God. And so it was quite a magical time, but it moved on into, it was like an apprenticeship is what it was. I got to learn to read music. I had to learn to read music. And also I've been very interested in studio techniques from the sort of records that had really pulled me in and pulled me right into the speakers in those early days, and how those things were done. I tried home recordings myself, but I wanted to know how it was done properly. I mean, I'd listened to Les Paul and just wondered at what was going on there as a kid. But, the things of like Sam Phillips and what was going on in chess was more sort of accessible immediately, I try those sort of things at home, but as a studio musician, I could ask how it was really done to engineers.
So, like in the book, all these different photos have such vast stories and information of your life.
Yeah.
So now we're going into the Yardbirds.
Yeah.
So that's...
Okay, so Jeff Beck and I go back to the point where when we first meet, we've both got homemade guitars. So that's how far back we go. And Jeff and I had always spoken about, because I did I got accepted into the studio world, and I was really happy doing that, because it was also quite creative up to a point. And Jeff had always said, oh, it'd be really good if you joined the Yardbirds, and because I'd helped Jeff get the job in the Yardbirds. And he did superb work in the Yardbirds. And I thought, yeah, it'd be really good. But there were 5 Yardbirds. And that's it. They were known as 5 Live Yardbirds. But I happened to be there on the night where Paul Samuel Smith, who was the band's producer and writer and the bass player, where he quit the band. And they had a sequence of events coming up, like the Marquee Club was a big club in London, and they had that coming up. And it was said, there was a discussion, and I said, well, look, I'll play then. I'll go in on bass. I think I was so happy to get out of the world of the studio musician that I probably would have played the triangle or the tambourine in the Yardbirds. But anyway, at this point, Jeff isn't in the band anymore, and there's the four of us sort of doing a really good job. What happens is, this is in France, we're doing a TV show. But what happens with the four Yardbirds is that we're over here and we're touring the whole of the underground circuit and the Grandy Ballrooms in Detroit, the Fillmore, Winterland, and et cetera, and we get to the point where, I don't know what your next photograph is going to be, but we'd built up like a cult audience, you know, coming to these things and coming to see the Yardbirds and listen to what we were doing, which was pretty different to what was coming out on the singles. And I made a decision at that point. Well, let's get to the next photos. Okay, at this point. So when the Yardbirds, the four Yardbirds, then split, and I actually tried to encourage them to keep going, but they you know, they'd been through 3 guitar changes, and Keith Ralph had had, you know, enough really of it, and plus this crippling schedule of singles that we were doing had nothing whatsoever to do with what we were doing live. So when that band dissolved, and I had the opportunity, they dissolved in July of 1968. What's so interesting here is that I'd made up my mind then, if they weren't going to continue, that I wanted to form my own band, and I knew exactly what it was that I wanted to do with it. I'd played the whole of the underground circuit with the Yardbirds, and I built up a reputation. I'd seen the emergence of what they called underground radio stations, which was FM, stereo, and they were playing longer tracks and the AM, you know, singles market. And I was keen to form a band where I would produce it, because I didn't want to get anybody else. I didn't want to be in this situation like we had in the Yardbirds, where somebody was getting us to record things which had nothing whatsoever to do with the band. I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew exactly how to go about doing it if I could find the personnel. Now, the idea of Led Zeppelin 1 that I had was that it was going to be a guitar tour de force. However, it was not going to be at the expense of the other musicians, so everyone was going to be featured, and the group character, if you like, the fusion of the musicians, was going to be representative of each of the individuals, and I think that that's really how it was on the first album. It was designed to be that way.
In your work prior to that, when you were mentioning about Jeff Beck before, and like listening to Jeff Beck Truth and listening to you play, and you can just hear what's going to come. And you know, You Shook Me is on Truth, but it's nothing like on Led Zeppelin 1.
No, because I didn't know he'd recorded You Shook Me.
Yeah.
But the fact was that we were, the sort of groups around that point of time were all doing similar sorts of numbers. And it's a coincidence and Jeff's version's totally different. The version that I did was closer to the Muddy Waters version.
When
it was intended to be, though, yeah.
It's fantastic. When you listen to Led Zeppelin 1 or you listen to Jimmy's music, I'm always so moved because it's so vast. And all of a sudden you're involved with sociology and psychology and philosophy, and the people, the individuals, the stories that are being played, you always can feel empathy for that person. Because you're never, I mean, even, you know, it's the blues and everything, but you always can feel empathy for them. And there's always this, I don't know, it's subjective, but it's totally objective at the same time. It's just, and it lets the listener experience that. And I'm always, Jimmy, I tell you, I'm so moved. I listen to your music every day. And I never tire. No. But it always just is so profound and so moving, so strong. And I always think that Jimmy must have gotten together, all these professionals, and they sat down to create the perfect artistic works to move people. And did you do it?
Well, that was the attempt to put together a band that was really going to shake everything. The important part of this is, you know, I've alluded to the fact that the Yardbirds were still together. I think I did. In 1968, it was July when they disbanded. Well, the fact is that there is like some divine intervention at this point that must bring us all together, because John Bonham, for example, wasn't even known down in London. He was only known locally up in Birmingham, although I saw him play with Tim Rose in London. And he'd played, but he never had the chance to play drums like John Bonham was going to play in Led Zeppelin. It gave everybody, and John Paul Jones was he'd a fine session musician, and he'd done some arranging, but he never had the chance to show what John Paul Jones could do until he was in Led Zeppelin, and the same with Robert Plant. But as I say, you can hear everybody's these master musicians playing together. But nevertheless, in the first album, there was a definite direction of, for example, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, something like that. Well, you've got... Thank you. But you've got... The approach to that was unlike anything that anybody had ever done before, with the acoustic and the electric guitars and the blending and the dynamics and the tension, the drama of it. When I first met Robert, I brought him to my house, and I played him Dazed and Confused that the Yardbirds had done, and I played him amongst other things, but I played him Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. And I said, well, I played him the source material of Joan Baez. And I said, well, you sing this, sing around this, and I'm going to play this, and you'll see what I'm doing. And it was really good that he was mutable, and he wanted to, you know, get into it, because otherwise I'd have to look for someone else. But the thing is, okay, so Yardbirds break up in July, the end of July. We've got August. We're playing in now we're rehearsed at my house.
I'm gonna change just your performance.
This is really early days at the Marquee Club. But we've come over here playing. We do our album in October. We're playing in the States by the end of 1968. So we're only talking about a handful of months, and the band has rehearsed at my house. Then we go to Scandinavia, a handful of dates, a few dates in London, like the Marquee. We go in the studio in October, and that's it. We're over here by December. And by January, February, we've sort of really made a dent in America. It's phenomenal how it works.
Yeah, it's so quick. And I'm sorry, I just want to jump back to Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. Because, I've listened to the Joan Baez version.
Yeah.
And, it's fantastic. And it's great to listen to her voice. But what you brought to it, to that song, is, it's a migration.
Yeah.
And, you know, all of a sudden, you know, you have antlers coming out of your head. And it's the power and the force of nature. And, you know, it just, everything goes to a different level.
But see, what I heard in the Joan Baez one was, it was on an album, and it was a live in concert. And I thought it was a traditional number because on that, it was a Vanguard album. I remember it had no writer, so I assumed it was traditional. But it was really haunting. And it just inspired me to come up with this the whole of the, as you know it, the whole of the guitar bed that it's all about, with the acoustic and then this sort of flamenco accents that comes in to heighten the whole drama of it. It's something that I probably would have done it with the Yardbirds if we'd have stayed together. But as it was something that I had, you know, burning inside me to do this. But with the quality of these musicians, I mean, it just really came alive as well, because you could really push the dynamics on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this image, Jimmy, you're in the studio.
Yeah.
And you're working on which song here?
Well, I can tell you now, because, okay, so there was this house that I had where we rehearsed Led Zeppelin 1, and then we've toured around, and then we go in to my house again and we rehearse Whole Lot of Love, What Is and What Should Never Be, and we go to this studio where we recorded the first album. It's called Olympic Studios. And now I know exactly what it is that is being recorded here. And with these sort of new remaster packages that have come out, there's companion discs. And on Led Zeppelin 2, there's a track called La La. Now then, this is the acoustic guitar part being put on La La, and there's the organ, which is part of La La as well. So it's exactly at this point of the sessions, which should maybe run over a couple of days, of Whole Lot of Love and What Is and What Should Never Be. They were rehearsed at my house at Pangbourne, but this one was sort of put together in the studio, La La, which it comes out as an instrumental because Robert hasn't had time to work on it with the lyrics, so it just sort of stays on the shelf until relatively recently. It came out in June. So now you can hear the full story about it.
Yeah, it's great. So, and Jimmy, if you're, my creative process as a visual artist, you know, I carry things around that resonates, things that I find interesting. But your creative process, does it start, you hear a riff, or how does it start? How does it build? How do you bring things into it?
Yeah, well, it starts, for me, it always starts on the guitar. Even though I wrote lyrics in the earlier days, I wasn't that keen to be doing that, so I wasn't sort of writing reams of poetry and then putting the music to it. It was all about the music and, I guess, trying to develop my own technique so it had a character to it, but very much so that we'll go back to the Baby I'm Gonna Leave You, that whole aspect of the fingerstyle playing and what people sort of think of more as folk guitar, but also the aspect of it's like trance music, really, from the riffs from the Chicago, the sort of Howling Wolf and this sort of thing, all those things as well. So you get like this hybrid, really, of blues music and folk music and rockabilly. It's all in there. And modern classical's there too, and sort of my appreciation of Indian music and Arabic music, and all this stuff was there before I even did sessions. But now I've got a chance to really just keep expanding all these ideas, you know.
And so, are you feeling it? I mean, is it that, you know, there's a certain feeling, or what is it that, how it comes about? Because
well, say so okay, well, Whole Lot of Love. You see, that's something which I'll put that into something which is is more in the element of sort of trance, really. Because when you hear the version I'm sorry if I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just trying to make a point. So you got a comparison between like the Led Zeppelin Whole Lot of Love, which everyone knows, and then the version which is on the companion disc. It's more like a voodoo ritual, you know, because it's unnerving when it gets to the choruses and there's no choruses, and you've just got this whole pulsating rhythm. Now that comes down straight from the guitar riff. That's how that thing started up, and I knew exactly how that was supposed to be, you know. And say Immigrant Song as well, I'd have like the riffs and then just lay that in with the band, and I mean the riff is exactly what the bass drum pattern's going to do, you know. It's all this sort of stuff. So it could be things which are supposed to be hard and intense, and other things which are supposed to be really quite light, intrinsic, and more challenging, possibly.
And do you always think of these things as vast? Just that these sounds are, because they carry so far. I mean, they are, it's so vast.
So for example, on the first album, we were doing these things as in their riff format and song constructions, because it's acoustic guitar, your time is going to come, you know, that sort of thing. And but then you know, I just was applying the guitar overdubs very, very quickly to it, because I already sort of had it in my head. I hadn't worked them out, but I just knew instinctively what to sort of play, if you see. There was always elements of spontaneity about all of the overdubs.
Oh,
Okay.
I didn't realize. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, do this one. Because this room here, this is rather interesting, because that is that's the house where Led Zeppelin gets routine there, and where we're doing the first album, and where a Whole Lot of Love is rehearsed. That's that room where I'm standing up there with that huge jardiniere.
So this was your home.
Yeah, that's it. That was it.
Yeah.
And you can see by the top right that it was right on the edge of the River Thames, and it was fantastic. You know, it was wonderful living there in the countryside, and I had this launch, a boat, and I could take it out on the river at night, and I had a really good lifestyle, I tell you.
Yeah.
Eligible bachelor, you know.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There's a drawing down at the bottom. Is that?
I'll tell you, you'll love this story, Jeff, because that jardiniere came from Paris. That, but that on the left. But that is it's the Three Graces by Burne-Jones, and I used to go searching through sort of flea markets and things, and I really thought that I'd found a Burne-Jones there.
Yeah.
And actually, it turned out to be a print from the time, a contemporary print. But I thought, this is it. You know, you got a good eye, and now you've really proved it. But but I was wrong.
And so music today, I mean, the sounds have been compressed a lot. And, do you think there's a future that music can come back and we can get larger sounds, get equipment that's going to provide
the main difference in the music of Led Zeppelin and say what there is today is that you're relying totally on performance and capturing a live performance. And from what I sort of see about Pro Tools recording, it still involves the imagination and the application of that with mixing, and you get some amazing stuff that's done. But where it sort of disturbs me a bit is when you hear that vocals are done not in whole verses, but syllable by syllable they're put together. And you know, from my point of view, it's about performance. And when we're talking about music today, I do go in London. I go to clubs where there's young musicians playing, and for no reason, a business reason or anything like that, not to look for bands to produce, not at all. It's more a question to see how young musicians, how they feel it, how they see it, and what their interpretations of how they put guitar music together, for example, with drums or whatever. But because it's constantly changing, music is always going to keep changing, and I just really like to to hear what's going on, you know, like we all do.
It's great. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. But that reel to reel, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, this image, I mean, in being able to put some of these images together, I was able to go through the book and choose different images. So the last one that was up there, I had that image in. I had to select it down, and the 92nd Street Y was asking for fewer images. And so then that image, we ended up bringing back in what was really nice, but I had that image in prior, and then it was pulled out. But I always enjoyed this one, because this, you know, you could look at it and you could think of, you know, you out in the countryside, and yes, with that type of acoustic guitar and Led Zeppelin 3. And
it is. It's exactly that. You could see from the picture before, and I was saying, well, there's the Thames. It was in the countryside, more or less. But this is down in Wales, and this is as a result of touring during 1969. We just did not stop. And in the book, I've got the itineraries, and that's not all of it. But even that it's just so intense the whole of that year. And at this point, where Robert and I go to this cottage in Wales, which really is a countryside out there. There's just sort of sheep on hills, and it's just valleys and mountains. It's absolutely stunning. And yeah, it was that sort of, right there, I'll tell you that there's a bit of stubble sort of showing. We're staying at this cottage, which had, it didn't have electricity. It had gas lights. And so there wasn't really that much hot water. You'd have to boil it up in a kettle. So I started growing a beard at this period of time. And the beard just keeps going for quite a while. I don't know whether you can have another photograph. It almost looks like a sort of black Father Christmas. But anyhow, yeah, this is... It says down by the river in the gorgeous Welsh countryside that surrounds Bronera, and that was the name of this cottage, and it was quite magical there. Third album, absolutely, Jeff. That's where it kicked. You know, we kicked off some of the acoustic stuff there, and we wrote "That's the Way" was recorded there. So that's out for a walk. That was out for a walk.
So
now then, this isn't out for a walk. This is.
Yeah. So I mean, the band Led Zeppelin really kind of changed the looking at live performance. I mean, you're talking about you know, kind of a happening and a performance type of art. I mean, this is as big as the arenas would get, right? I mean, didn't Zeppelin really start the large arena shows? Quite possible we get to that point, because the Beatles had obviously done that with Shea Stadium and that. The thing with Led Zeppelin is that right from the beginning of it, within a few months going into 1969, we can't supply the demand. Everywhere that we play is full. And we start doing repeat nights in places, and it's still full. So when we were doing outside events, it wasn't confined by the four walls, and you can see that it was just immense. But we were just getting, all the way through, even right up to 1980, we were just getting huge crowds coming, and it just kept appearing to get larger and larger. And did that energize you? I mean, would you feel the audience and feel more energized and feel like you could go into even deeper trance music?
Well, I think what happened is that it was very physical, the music, but it's in the early footage of us, we're sort of quite contained within it. But you start to explode more physically as well as musically, you know. So there was quite a physical performance to all of this. Now, by this time, the sets are getting pretty long, and one of the hardest things, because by now it's obviously not the first album, we're moving on through. The beard's gone. The beard's gone. But the sets got longer, because the hardest and most challenging thing was, as we did a new album, like the second album, It was what material to put in, and then the third album, what material to put in the set. And we'd just keep extending the sets because you didn't want to drop anything, because all of the numbers, once they went in the set, you could have real fun with them and change them around on the night. You never quite knew when you stood on the edge of the stage what was actually going to happen that night. You had an idea of the running order of the show, but there'd be things that would happen every night that would be different. So it was really
you would
cool.
change it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay.
This is another example of just how vast everything was at this time. I mean, how huge.
Well, you see, we were able to stay in New York and then commute outside of New York to go to Washington, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Boston, by plane and come back and actually be able to unpack. And in those days, you know, I'd have like a little traveling suitcase, which is a record player, and I'd have my sounds and my books there, and it was all quite civilized and cool.
You know, it's good.
But when you just see a shot of us all coming off a plane, there is a bit of a story behind it, but yeah, it looks like...
You know, I always loved those costumes of yours. You know,
yeah, well, you know,
look at
they are cool, they are cool.
And did you design them?
Well, not that one I didn't,
Yeah.
but because this is the one that's in Song Remains the Same. Yeah, and that's so this is about 1973, and because that's recorded at Madison Square Garden in 1973. Song Remains the Same, but then I started to really get into the whole aspect of the visual side of things, and I have the dragon suit made up. Which is, there's elements of that on this outfit here, but I actually, I didn't design this, but elements of this start to come into the other, it's interesting how it actually comes my way, this thing, but elements of it start to appear on the other stage clothes later.
Yeah. You know, I look at those clothes and the stars. And you know, it's
planets.
Yeah, the planets, the stars. I mean,
dragons.
Yeah, dragons. But it's just perfect. And then you know, the double neck guitar. I mean,
yeah.
So broad.
No.
It's just.
I don't know what you're going to say. Can I say the story?
But it's all exaggerated, and it's all, you know, so fantastic.
Iconic sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, iconic. But again, it. You know, it's so far out there, but it understands. It comes right back underneath, under you. And, you know, I think that there's empathy in the music that's there. I mean, it's the dishwasher, the guy doing dishes, but has these strong sensations and huge feelings, but you can always, you know, you can connect for them. You never feel intimidated by the power, because if the power's too strong for you, you're going to shy away from it. Yeah. But, you know, so you can have that.
play with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I always am trying to understand its strength.
Yeah, well, the thing is that a Led Zeppelin set would definitely generate energy. I mean, it's when you see bands with an audience, you see the band will start up and they'll send out sort of message to the audience, and then the audience respond and send back an energy, and there's this sort of communion between the audience and the band that will build. But the energy in Led Zeppelin concerts was just incredible, just amazing. And it wasn't an endurance test to be playing 3 hours. It was just really, or 3.5 hours, it was really exhilarating. And the fact that there was this sort of harnessing of the energy and the power of the music, where even on the first album, you've got these areas where it's really quiet, and then you've got the intensity of the chorus, if you want to call it that, but you know, the layering, and you've got the aspect of something like Stairway, where you said the double neck, you know, the double neck is as a result of Stairway to Heaven, because it had so many different guitars on it. Acoustic, it had 6-string solo, and he had the 12 strings, and it was a really important piece to come up with.
oh.
This is,
Try.
yeah. Well, all right, so you're having a good time, you know. I mean, yeah. This is. I think I captioned this homeopathic remedy. Yeah.
So, but the endurance, I mean, how did you maintain that type of endurance of the schedule and then, you know, the lifestyle?
Well, okay. I tell you what, the reality of it was that if you were in a band like that, you just had that energy, to be honest with you, because it was just so exhilarating. It just honestly was. It was. But the truth of it was, as those tours got longer, it was difficult. And I know everyone's going to laugh, but it would get to the point where you didn't sleep for a night. And then during Madison Square Garden for the filming in 1973, I don't think I really slept for like whatever it was, 5 days or whatever.
Wow.
But it built up from way back in the early part of that tour. And I wasn't sort of losing sleep every night, but it just sort of built. It was just a sort of energy tap was difficult to switch off. Wow. That's really the truth of it.
And
This
is from that time?
Yeah. This is New York, actually. And it was a photographer from New York, who's based in New York, called Warring Abbott. And he did these images, and they're great, aren't they? From '77, these are.
And so this is the dragon outfit too?
This is what I call the poppy suit, because this has got poppies, but it's all got dragon as well. The dragon suit that I call the dragon suit is the black one with all the gold embroidery. It's like kimono embroidery on it. But this I'd call this one the poppy suit, but it's confusing because you can see a dragon on it, I know. Yeah, but it's consistent. The imagery is consistent going through.
So, do you know what song you're playing here? Can you tell by that?
No. Not on that one. Sometimes I can tell, but not on that one. To be honest. But lots of people are thinking what it is, and
It's great,
sure.
and it's great that the Celebration Day film also captures, this type of look on film too, with the movement and it's
that was so good and it was so important to get it out, because it sort of showed us. I mean, there's so much that we're going to see today, lots of imagery around that time, and with the band, and there've been DVDs that came out of the time, because it was important to sort of have that document, if you like. But with Celebration Day, it was, we'd actually done Live Aid, and it was horrific. And it was because we only had half an hour to rehearse, and it wasn't enough. Because I think Queen had been rehearsing for months in England, and they did it the right way. And we did the Atlantic 40th here in New York, and that we came in more or less within hours of it, and the time we were supposed to go on stage just stretched. We were all sort of pretty exhausted by the time we went on. So with Celebration Day, we had a chance to actually come together and rehearse properly for it and be seen. So people who were going to go there hadn't even been born maybe when Led Zeppelin were around. Some people were. Maybe some people had seen it. But the fact was there was a reputation, and there was a reason why there was a reputation of why we were so good, and this sort of connection on stage. And it was important to not take this casually, take it really, really seriously, and still have the area or the element whereby you could change things on stage like we would have done in the past and improvise, and we did. So Celebration Day showed us more or less looking like we look now, Just to show that, you know, yeah, sure, we could do it if we had to.
And it was great, Jason Bonham
Wonderful.
playing.
Wonderful. Jason, yeah, really. You know, Jason had the important thing of putting in so much rehearsal to this with Jason, myself, and John Paul Jones was because this was a sort of pad that Robert was going to be singing on, and it was just really important that Jason, he's in that film Song Remains the Same, and he's a kid, his dad's teaching him drums, and we knew him as Jason the Kid, you know. And it was, I'd toured with Jason in 1988, and we played here at the Ritz and a couple of times, and well, a couple of nights. Only once did we do this, 1988, this tour. But I knew how good Jason was on the drums, and how good he was at playing the Led Zeppelin stuff. And so when the opportunity came for all of us to play with, you know, John Paul Jones, Robert, myself, with Jason, it was important to have Jason feeling a member of the band and not just, you know what I mean, not an outsider, but right in there. And the only way to do that was to have all these solid rehearsals and just us playing together. And all we did was Led Zeppelin material. We didn't start drifting off into new things. It was just, that was the mission. And he had the biggest shoes to fill on that stage, but he was phenomenal. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
then...
In the book, I also learned that you performed at Jason's wedding. The band members got together.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
So
this is the side of the stage from, again, 1977 tour, and those are the guitars that are there. They're sort of backups in case you break a string or whatever. In those days, you notice there's only one double neck. Yeah. But everything else has got a backup to it, more or less.
Here it's listed the main artillery.
Yeah, it is. The main artillery
of the guitar army. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, that image that was on the screen just a little while ago, but we went past it, but it shows that you're backstage and maybe you're tuning your guitar and you can see everybody out there.
Yeah.
But I really love that image because, you know, the self, I mean, you live with your creativity, you live with your passion, but yet, you know, it's all that, it's so intimate there in that image. And, you know, then the world's out there in front of you to go out and to share that. No. And do you see the creative act as a generous act? Well,
I think I can't impress enough on everybody just how each concert was different and how there were different elements because we took it that seriously. We weren't the sort of band who went out there and did just a carbon copy of what the record was. No, it was far from that. It was really a full-on assault into the music. And that's why all of the albums come out so differently, because we weren't caught up in a singles market. So it was this whole, we were able to sort of expand all the musical horizons and keep pushing it. And thereby you come up with new things, you see.
So here you're with Robert touring?
Yeah. This was, we came back together to do a project which actually was linked to MTV. And I guess that was all right till we started talking about going to Morocco and recording in Marrakesh in the square, which is a medieval square. And I think then they started to scratch their heads a bit. But there were two parts to this. We called it the Unleaded project and No Quarter. And this part was recorded in a sound studio, and we had an orchestra. Well, we had the part of a Western orchestra, and then the Egyptian musicians as well. There were 4 string players and 4 percussionists to augment everything else. Like we've got our own drummer here. And this was done in the studio, and I think we may well be doing Kashmir at this point. But however, there was also this recording that was done in Morocco, and we went over there with like one track that was done to a tape loop that we performed in the square, and then we started working with local musicians called guitarists, and we were coming up with music there and then on the spot with them. So this whole project was really interesting on a creative level because it was moving all the time, and there was no time to sort of stop. It was ever onward, you know.
You've always been involved with world music and all different types of music.
Well, yeah, I have. Yeah.
And so this is from the...
so this is the O2, yeah. So this is early on in the O2, I can tell you that.
You know, I think we all feel so lucky. You know, it's just so great that you did it, Jimmy. You know?
Well, I want to tell you the story, Jeff, and I want to tell everyone the story of this, because we've done all this rehearsing with Jason, and we do production rehearsals, and then we've got one concert. That's all we've got. We don't have a warm-up. I mean, nobody goes out without having a warm-up, and so we're out on the stage, and I don't really know how hot it's going to be or anything. So I've got. So this is probably into it. If this is maybe this might be the production rehearsal, but the reality of it is that's all we get, a production rehearsal, and the only audience to vibe this whole set off of is just the people of the sort of crew and all of that. So then we get onto the stage at the O2, and it's so hot. But I didn't think it was going to be that hot, so I've got like waistcoat, long coat, and as the first three numbers, the idea is it's going to be the first number is Good Times, Bad Times, segueing into Ramble On, into Black Dog. And so people, by the end of that, they're going to, oh my goodness, they're really taking this seriously. And we had, that's the whole point. But as there hadn't been any warm-up gigs, you didn't really know, we hadn't played the whole set in front of an audience or anything. So it was really quite historic and very brave at the same time. But so there's this outfit that during the course of that O2 show, or the Celebration Day DVD, you see that the layers are coming after the first three numbers. Off comes the jacket, and then it's not long before the waistcoat comes off, because it's boiling on stage. They've got so much lighting on us that it's like being in a sauna. It's unbelievable. But anyway, there we are. They're the four stalwarts doing a brilliant job.
So, you know, Jimmy, you've been involved with so many, I mean, everybody has been so influenced by your work, but so many people really have tried to show you the impact of your influence on them. So you're here with the Black Crowes?
Yeah.
And so you even tour with them a little bit, or you do some performances with them? Yeah,
when we actually had this project, well, at this point, I've been invited to play with them. The two brothers have played with me in a charity event in London, and it was like a reciprocal gesture, really, to come. I was asked to come and play with them. Now, what we were doing was Black Crowes music and Led Zeppelin music, but actually all that gets released is the Led Zeppelin music because there was a re-record clause that they had, and they weren't allowed to re-record their music, so it didn't appear on the CD and that, which is a great shame. But we played here. We kicked that off at the Roseland Ballrooms here, actually. Yeah, really. And they were so good to play with, Black Crowes. They were fantastic. A real good band. It was. Well, I really enjoyed it. Okay.
Yes. So.
Okay.
So even a larger arena here.
Well, yeah.
Could they get any bigger?
Well, I've got to tell you that this lady here, Leona Lewis, she'd never done a solo she hadn't done anything solo at this point. She'd been in this X Factor, which you have X Factor here, yeah, or something similar, yeah. And she was on it, and she was offered the chance to do this, and she'd done more or less. Yeah. She'd more or less. This is the Olympics.
The Olympics.
Olympic.
Yeah.
And it's the closing ceremony where they're going to do the handover from Beijing to London, and she's offered to do this, and she was amazing, absolutely amazing, because she just won the X Factor final, and the next thing she does is Beijing Olympics. It's huge. Bless her, she was really, really ballsy. She was great, and I had the best. You know, I mean, that was great. I mean, I really enjoyed playing with. I'll tell you, and the opportunity was to play Whole Lot of Love. First of all, it was put, would it be okay if they played Whole Lot of Love at the Olympics? And I went, yeah, absolutely, great. And then they said, oh yeah, but really, then it comes back, email. You know, it's email correspondence, right? Then it comes back, well, what we really want to do is to have Leona Lewis singing, you play it, and David Beckham be on the thing as well. Well, it's cool, right? But it's all about the Olympics and London and everything. And I said, well, I want to play it all. And they said, no, you can play the whole of the version with the middle part and everything. Yeah. And Leona Lewis is going to sing. And I went, oh, boy, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'll jump at something like this. And so
there
we were.
Great. It was great.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah. And then, you know, closely after, because all of this comes like post the O2, and so does this. Quite closely after the O2. This is, the O2's in December, and I think we're doing this in the soundstage of Warner's, I think in January. Wow. And this was fascinating because Davis Guggenheim had this idea of doing the documentary, and he wanted the three of us to have like this communion on the stage, but he didn't want us to confer notes or meet up beforehand so that we had any sort of safety plan. I tell you what I would like to have done. We could have said like a blues number. If we get stuck, we'll just do something and see how we all work on it. But as it was, we all had to come in from separate directions, and he captured every moment of our expressions, and it was fascinating. It was great working with him. We did one number, and I'm not going to say it because you're going to clap. But it's there. I think it's just here right now on the bottom one. And
let us clap, Jimmy.
The Edge is discussed in the documentary about how he's like a scientist, you know, and he explains how he does it all. But on this number, he actually ad-libs a solo, and it's just brilliant to hear this great solo that he does, because he doesn't know he's going to be presented with this number, and it was In My Time of Dying.
Yeah.
That's
right. That's right.
But it was great. It was cool. And
it's a great film.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
And again, I think that The Edge and and Jack White really, they're trying to show you also just how much they appreciate and what you brought to the table and your influence on them.
Yeah, it's cool. It was wonderful.
And this is
well
today.
That's the last image in the book.
Yeah.
And well, on the choirboy it might get loud, and on this one it says it might get louder.
Yeah.
Well, you
know Well, Jimmy has so many things that he's involved with and working on, and he has so many people. I mean, if you look at the album covers that he's been involved with, they're amazing. But if Jimmy ever is doing something in the near future, I mean, I hope you think about maybe the possibility that I could at least try to present an image for a cover.
Oh, yeah, all right then.
I would love to at least have the chance to try.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
So we have some questions. And,
Oh, yeah, good.
The audience has written some notes. I'm going to have to get my glasses here. And, but, yeah.
Thank you very much. Oh, gosh. I'm also very shy, I'll be honest with you.
So, Jimmy, this is, how did you become interested in playing the theremin?
Well, the theremin music was sort of alive and well in sort of 1930s, really, and it was quite a it was a piece of science, really, and it was sort of played with two hands, and there was a smaller version of it which just looked like a transistor radio, really, with an aerial. But the effect was the same, that when you switched it on, you tune it in so that you didn't have any sort of sound coming through the amplifier. But then the closer that you got to the aerial, you'd have a low sort of note here, and the closer you got to the aerial, the higher the tone would be. So I married this up with, they were around in the sort of late 60s, but I married this up with the tape delay so that I could make all sort of quite radical shifts with it. And it's used on A Whole Lot of Love. You can hear it on that, on the middle section. Yeah. And it's also on No Quarter. You can hear it just making a bit of appearance. But because the whole of the Led Zeppelin thing was something where you could really, really sort of change and mutate things, I really used to work out quite a bit on that, on A Whole Lot of Love, on the live shows.
Okay, so can you talk about putting your work in the studio, can you talk about your work in the studio, putting together all the guitar parts of Achilles' Last Stand?
Yeah. Okay, well, the whole recording at that point of time was done, the whole of that album was done over a 3-week period. So that's the recording of it, and the overdubs and the mixing. The whole work is done in 3 weeks. Right from Led Zeppelin 1, I was very keen to be applying guitar textures. I mean, it's something that I'd heard before from Les Paul, of course, but giving the guitar textures, and and the colours of it. I mean, it's the whole thing, you know, the building, the architecture of it, if you want. And I wanted to do something which was a guitar epic, and that really had everything sort of thrown at it that I could do. And that's it. Achilles' Last Stand is the one that really represents that. And how I went about it was, I gave you the time of the recording, all of the whole of the album, because the guitar, I know it sounds unbelievable, but the guitar overdubs for that were done, the initial guitars were done, and then all the overdubs are done in more or less one night. Yeah, I know. Wow. I mean, I couldn't do it now, probably, but I'd like to think I could. But no, that's what was done with them. It was just the focus and the work ethic was unbelievable then.
Yeah, that's, you know, we're talking about the music, but all the producing and all the mixing and all the detail and how, you know.
You've got to have a good memory when you're producing. Yeah. That's for sure. Especially with something like Achilles, because you've got to know exactly where all the guitar parts are, and you've got to cue them in. And the other thing about especially the Led Zeppelin music was the fact that there'd be the engineer, and you know, I was a producer, so I was in the studio more than everybody else and doing the mixing as well. And so there would be cases like when I was working with, say, Eddie Kramer here in New York on the second album, there wouldn't just be the two hands on the desk, there may well be a third hand from me, or even as there were more tracks, like say the second album had 8-track recording, but when you get to 16, there'd be more channels and more effects channels. And during the mixing stages. It'd be all organic mixing. It wouldn't be sort of programmed. You'd have like 4 hands sometimes on these mixing consoles doing these things. So, yeah.
You know, it's interesting too, because sometimes, you know, on some of the songs, it's almost like you can hear through like the tape or something. You can hear like another version of the song underneath it, whether it's like a little bit of a vocal that sounds like it's coming through from underneath. It's almost like you're hearing the backside of the tape.
Yeah, well, you see, it's sometimes, especially on the first album, you hear Robert's voice is so loud that it's coming through the other sort of instruments. It's bleeding through. But then when the main vocal goes on, you still hear this ghosting going on. So when it comes to the point of something which is an effect like this, then I ployed that into something like a Whole Lot of Love, so it becomes a real sort of effect. So, you know, all the time I was working on things, you know, like there was something I came up with which was like reverse echo, backwards echo, and that's on the first album, and then that features through to, it comes to its climax in when the levee breaks and you hear all this sort of pulsating. It's cool. Cool stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, we could. Each song is just amazing. How close is the alternative take of "Song Remains the Same" on the new reissue to how you originally envisioned it as an instrumental, and how did it develop into its final vocal version?
Well, when it came to the point of doing the records, I'd usually, or the point of recording, I'd usually, for the first album, I had pretty much all of it, but I'd always have maybe 4 numbers to go into the studio with. And it just so happened that when it comes to the point of Houses of the Holy, I've got Rain Song, and I've got the entirety of that, and I've done a home demo of it as well with Mellotron and everything. And then Over the Hills and Far Away is another one I got the complete thing of. But I've got something which I've called loosely I've called it an overture, and the idea of it was that it was going to come in with such vitality, and then sort of climax, and then you'd segue into Rain Song. Now, when it came to the point of rehearsing this with the band, it was going really well. It was supposed to be a guitar instrumental, by the way, and it was going really well. But there was a call for a half time in it, so we put a half time in it, and then once the half time went in it, Robert started singing over the half time, and what was going to be the overture suddenly becomes Song Remains the Same. So, which is brilliant, you know, the whole of the lyrics and the vocals and everything on that is really, really superb. So that was the original idea of it, was an instrumental, but as with everything else, it's going to change and mutate. And so it always stayed in its original form, if you like, that it was Song Remains the Same, followed by Rain Song, because I had the ability of doing it on the double neck. I could do both of them, and whenever we did it, we'd do them together. So it still sort of followed the original sort of plot, but it changed.
Jimmy, what are your plans for 2015 and beyond?
Okay, right. Well, it's an interesting question, because what I've been involved with is I had a sort of plan, and the plan started off when the Celebration Day, which had to come out, even though it came out a few years after the O2 concert, it was important to have that out. And that was the sort of start of it. I'd also wanted to get this website together, the book, because the book comes before the website, and then I'd been archiving my material, and I got through the sort of stuff that I'd done in early stages when I was doing home recordings and things, and it goes to the Yardbirds, and it gets to the point of Led Zeppelin, and I listened to the mixes that were done at Sunset Sound, and this is way in advance of where we're at now, and I'd hoped that I could imagine a project whereby all of these outtakes and different versions could come in a sort of with dignity, with the original, not just a couple of bonus tracks thrown in, but so that it was a sort of full project having companion discs. So we now know about that. You know what they are, the companion discs, and we're at the point where Led Zeppelin 4 and Houses of the Holy, we're about halfway through. But there's more releases to be coming next year. But the game plan that I had was that while these releases would be going on for next year, then I'll be getting up to speed, like I did for the O2, to be playing live. And so, well, I think okay. Well, I think with encouragement like this, then I'll definitely have to, hey. But anyway, that's the plan for 2015, is to be working on a very secret project that I'm going to do. I don't want people to know what it is or anything, or project about what it is, and I'm sure there'll be internet forums telling me what I'm doing, but I know what I'm going to do. And hopefully, into later 2015, I'll be seen to be playing, which is what the idea is. So that was my game plan, going back to the Celebration Day coming out,
Well, you can see how, we're all...
Thank you very much.
Well, anyways, Jimmy, I mean, this has been fantastic. You see what we want,
Okay.
We want more, because
Me too, I do.
we're so amazed.
I do too, but I really felt that all the projects, the Led Zeppelin stuff, and the current releases where it readdresses the studio world of Led Zeppelin and giving more information on it. I thought that was so important to do it and do it properly. So, but it's all right. I'm still a young man, so. I've got time on my hands.
And, it's amazing. Great artists get better. And you are so fantastic. You're so amazing. And I always like to think of like Picasso. I mean, late Picasso is amazing. It doesn't get any better. And late Page, doesn't get any better.
Well, great. Thank you. That's so cool. Thank you.
I guess we want to thank everyone. I think that...
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure.